The rooftop smelled like money. That was the first thing Maya Collins noticed when she stepped off the elevator and into the glittering chaos of Derek's celebration party, the thick, invisible scent of wealth that clung to every designer suit, every spritzed neck, every glass of champagne being clinked above the Manhattan skyline. Midtown spread out beneath them like a circuit board lit up at full power, and somewhere in the crowd, a jazz quartet played something soft and expensive. Maya smoothed the hem of her black dress and smiled at no one in particular. She was good at that, smiling at nothing. 2 years with Derek Cole had made her a professional. "You look incredible," Derek had told her earlier, fixing her necklace clasp with practiced fingers and pressing a kiss to the back of her neck. She'd leaned into it. That was the thing about Derek, he knew exactly when to be warm, exactly when to pull you in, exactly how much tenderness to dispense so you never questioned what was underneath. Now, an hour into the party, he had disappeared into a cluster of men in the far corner, laughing at something she couldn't hear, and Maya found herself alone near the bar with a fresh glass of champagne she hadn't asked for. "From Mr. Cole," the bartender said, nodding toward the crowd. She looked across the rooftop. Derek caught her eye and raised his own glass. She smiled, that professional nothing smile, and brought the champagne to her lips. It tasted fine. A little sweeter than she expected. She drank it anyway. 20 minutes later, the city started to tilt. It was subtle at first, a softness behind her eyes, a warmth spreading from her chest outward, like she'd been wrapped in something too heavy. Maya set her glass down on the railing and pressed her palm flat against the concrete ledge to steady herself. The conversations around her blurred into a single, low hum. "I need some air," she thought, and almost laughed because she was already outside. She turned to look for Derek. The corner where he'd been standing was empty. She scanned the crowd, the socialites, the men with hard jaws and soft smiles, the women in diamonds, and she could not find his face anywhere. Her heel caught on something and she lurched sideways. A hand closed around her arm. She looked up, and up, at a man she had never seen before. Tall, dark-suited. The kind of still that wasn't calm so much as controlled, like something powerful that had decided for now not to move. His jaw was sharp, his eyes darker than the sky above them, and he was looking at her the way a person looks at something that is about to fall off a ledge. Because she was. Almost. "I've got you," he said. His voice was low, unhurried. He wasn't asking if she was okay. He wasn't looking around for help. He simply assessed the situation the way a man assesses something that is now his problem to solve, and made a decision. He picked her up. "Wait," she started, but the word dissolved. The rooftop tilted again. The city blurred. She could feel herself being carried, through the crowd, which parted without complaint, through a door, into an elevator that smelled like leather and cold metal. "Derek," she managed. "He's not coming," said without emotion. Just fact. She tried to focus on the man's face, but the drug, whatever it was pulling her under in slow velvet waves. She caught a flash of his right hand gripping the elevator rail. A tattoo on the back of it, dark ink against olive skin. A serpent coiled around a crown. Then the doors opened and the night took her. She was aware of things in pieces after that. The backseat of a car that moved too smoothly. A skyline through tinted glass. Manhattan getting smaller, receding across dark water. A penthouse. High ceilings. The kind of silence that only money can buy. A bed with sheets that felt like clouds. She was aware at some point of a presence near her. Not touching her, not hovering, just there, the way a lighthouse is there, steady and fixed while everything else moves. She heard breathing that wasn't hers. She smelled expensive cologne, something dark and cedar-edged, and in the fog of whatever was happening to her body, she found it strange that the smell made her feel safe. At some point in the dark, her hand moved on its own. She reached out, fingers searching the sheets, until they found something warm and solid. A hand. It didn't pull away. She held it, and somewhere under the drug and the confusion and the fear she hadn't yet processed, something in her settled. She slept. Morning came through floor-to-ceiling windows in long, gold stripes. Maya opened her eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling, an unfamiliar room, an unfamiliar bed dressed in charcoal gray linen. For 3 full seconds, she simply stared upward and let the wrongness of everything wash over her. Then she sat up. The room was enormous, spare, intentional, expensive in the way of things that don't need to announce themselves. Through the window, Manhattan glittered across the Hudson, which meant she was in Jersey. She was in someone's penthouse in Jersey City, wearing her own dress from last night, and she had absolutely no memory of how she'd gotten here. Her head ached. Her mouth was dry. Her last clear memory was the champagne on the rooftop. The door opened. He entered the room the same way he'd carried her out of the party, without asking permission, without hesitation, as if the space reorganized itself around him. He set a glass of water on the nightstand and then sat in the chair across the room and looked at her. Not with hunger. Not with apology. Just with the calm, complete attention of a man who had been waiting for this moment and had no intention of rushing it. "You're awake," he said. "Where am I?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Safe." He paused. "My name is Roman." Maya looked at the glass of water. She looked at the window. She looked at him, at his dark eyes, at the tattoo visible below his shirt cuff, a serpent wrapped around a crown. She remembered that tattoo. "Roman?" she repeated slowly. "Roman who?" Something shifted behind his eyes. Not guilt. Not quite. Something more like the look of a man who knows that what he is about to say is going to detonate, and has made peace with the explosion. "Roman Cole," he said. The name hit her like cold water. Cole. Same as Derek. She spent the night with a stranger, her boyfriend's own brother. She doesn't remember it. But Roman does, and he's not letting her leave. Subscribe to Nikolai's stories to find out what happens next. Maya didn't scream. She wanted to. There was a scream somewhere inside her, high and sharp and building, but what came out instead was a silence so complete it seemed to press against the walls of the room. Roman watched her the way he seemed to watch everything, without flinching, without filling the quiet with noise, without offering her the comfort of a softened expression. He simply waited. "Cole," she finally said. "Your last name is Cole." "Yes." "Same as Derek Cole. My boyfriend." The word felt strange in her mouth now. Boyfriend. Like it belonged to a different language. "That's not a coincidence." "No," Roman said. "It's not." She stood up from the bed, slowly because her legs were still unsteady, and crossed to the window. Manhattan sparkled across the water, indifferent and brilliant, and she pressed 2 fingers to the glass as if grounding herself in its reality. "Tell me," she said. "Everything." Roman was quiet for a moment. Then, "You were drugged last night. Something put into your drink. My people identified it, a sedative compound, fast-acting. You were showing signs of distress near the rooftop railing when I found you." Pause. "Another 2 minutes, and the men who were watching you would have taken you instead of me." Maya turned from the window. "What men?" "Men who work against my interests." His tone was even, unapologetic. He talked about enemies the way other people talked about traffic. "You were a target, Miss Collins? I don't yet know the full scope of why. But until I do, you're staying here." "I'm not staying anywhere." She crossed her arms. "Call me a cab. Call me an Uber. Call me anything. I'm going home." "No." The word was so flat, so final, so completely without cruelty or negotiation, that it stopped her cold. "Excuse me?" "Your safety," Roman said, "is my concern now. That is not a discussion." She stared at him. He stared back. Neither of them moved. It was the photo that broke her open. She had been pacing the length of the penthouse living room, a vast, quietly stunning space in charcoal and slate, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, when she stopped in front of a narrow console table near the hallway. On it sat a single framed photograph. 2 men at what appeared to be a formal event. A gala or a reception of some kind, marble floors, chandeliers, men in tuxedos. One of them was Roman, younger, maybe mid-20s, standing very straight, one hand in his pocket. And beside him, grinning his easy, camera-ready grin, Derek. Maya picked up the frame. Her hands were not shaking. She was surprised by that. She carried it back into the main room where Roman sat reviewing something on his phone, and she held it in front of him. "Explain this," she said. Roman looked at the photo. Then at her. "Derek is my half-brother. Same father, different mothers. He grew up separately. We were introduced when he was 19. He never told me you existed." The words came out quiet. That was the part that landed hardest. Not that Roman was real, but that Derek had erased him entirely. 2 years and not a single mention of a brother. Not a story, not a name, not a slip. She had believed she knew Derek's whole world, and he had hidden an entire person in it. "Derek has reasons for the things he does," Roman said, and there was something in his voice, not bitterness exactly, something older and more tired than bitterness, that told her this was not new information for him. "He set me up," Maya said. Not a question. Roman said nothing, which was its own answer. She set the photo face down on the coffee table. She did it carefully because she was afraid that if she let herself feel the full weight of what she was understanding, she would shatter something. The photo, the table, herself. "You said I'm staying here." "Yes." and I don't have a choice. You have exactly as many choices as keep you alive, Roman said. Right now, that means staying inside this building until I know what you're walking back into. He gave her a room, her own, separate from his, at the end of a long hall. He left fresh clothes on the bed. A simple white shirt, dark trousers, both clearly purchased in her size, which unsettled her in a way she didn't want to examine. He left a phone on the nightstand and she grabbed it immediately and dialed Lena's number from memory. Dead air. No signal at all. She lowered the phone slowly. Gilded cage, she thought. Same bars, prettier paint. Dinner was wordless for 10 minutes. Roman had food brought up, steak, roasted vegetables, bread warm from an oven somewhere below them, and they sat at opposite ends of a long dining table like two countries with a disputed border between them. Maya ate because her body demanded it. Roman ate like a man who had trained himself to treat meals as logistics rather than pleasure. But he watched her. Not obviously, not in a way that would give her something to object to, but consistently, the way a person watches something they are trying to understand. She refused to look away when she caught him at it. They held each other's gaze for 3 seconds, for 5, and then Roman returned to his food, and Maya felt something odd bloom in her chest that she immediately and firmly refused to name. Later, she heard 2 voices in the hallway outside her room. Roman's low and unhurried. Another man's, rough, careful, worried. She's not one of us. The second voice. You know what happens to people who stay too long in our world, Roman? They don't get to leave it the same way they came in. A long silence. Go home, Victor, Roman said. Footsteps. Then quiet. Maya lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the hand she had reached for in the night. The hand she couldn't remember but somehow still felt in her palm, warm and certain. She thought about the fact that she had reached for it at all. She told herself it meant nothing. She was not sure she believed that. The safe house was in Hoboken, a brownstone that looked like every other brownstone on the block, except for the blacked-out windows on the second floor and the 2 men in the parked SUV across the street who were definitely not reading newspapers. Roman brought her there on the second morning, and she went because she had decided, somewhere between midnight and dawn, that passive waiting was going to drive her insane. If Roman Cole knew something about what Derek had done, she needed to know it too. All of it. Every piece. A long table in the second-floor room held laptops, printed documents, and a corkboard dense with photographs and strings. Victor Santos, who she recognized from the hallway voice, a broad-shouldered man with a careful face and a scar through his left eyebrow, acknowledged her with a nod that was mostly neutral and partly reluctant. Roman stood at the head of the table. Show her, he said. Victor pulled up a file on the laptop. He turned the screen toward Maya and stepped back. She read. It took her 4 minutes to absorb it all. She read slowly because she kept having to back up and reread things her brain refused to process on the first pass. Derek Cole owed the Vega cartel $600,000. The debt was 18 months old and had been accruing interest in the form of escalating threats, 3 burned business fronts and, most recently, a deadline: pay in full within 30 days or deliver collateral. The collateral they had agreed to accept, according to a wire intercept Roman's team had pulled 2 weeks ago, was a person. Specifically, a person close to Derek with no criminal ties, no family connections to organized crime, and no one powerful enough to come looking. Maya Collins. 26. Event coordinator. No family in New York. Best friend 1, Lena Brooks, civilian. Boyfriend, Derek Cole. Cling. Invisible. Expendable. Maya read that word, expendable, and something inside her went very still. She had been with this man for 2 years. She had met his friends, attended his events, laughed at his jokes, defended him to Lena when Lena said he was slippery, believed him when he said he was working late, trusted him when he said you're the only one, Maya, I mean it. And he had looked at her at some point during those 2 years and done the math. Figured out that she fit the profile. Decided that she was the safest thing he had to lose. She set her palms flat on the table. He was going to sell me, she said. Not a question. Not hysteria. Just the flat, terrible fact of it, spoken aloud so it would stop echoing only inside her head. To the Vega cartel, yes, Roman said. He was watching her again, that same steady, assessing watch. Not cold exactly. More like a man who has delivered bad news before and knows that the only dignified thing to do is not look away from the person receiving it. How long have you known? 2 weeks. We intercepted the communication the night I arrived at the party. I went because I intended to warn Derek to end it. Pause. He had already given them a timeline. The party, Maya said. He drugged me at the party because he needed you compliant. Easy to move, Roman's voice was even, but his jaw was tight. The men I mentioned, the ones watching you that night, were Vegas. They were there to collect. The room was very quiet. Maya inhaled once, long and slow, the way you breathe before you go underwater, and then she straightened her spine and looked at Victor and said, "Is there anything else in the file I need to see?" Victor glanced at Roman. Roman gave a small nod. "No," Victor said. "That's everything." "Thank you," she said and walked out of the room. She made it to the room at the end of the hall before she stopped moving. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands together between her knees and stared at the floor and breathed. She did not cry. She had the distinct feeling that if she started, she would not stop, and she was not prepared to do that here, in a safe house that belonged to a man she had met 2 days ago and still didn't entirely understand. She didn't hear the door. She didn't hear his footsteps. She just became aware at a certain point that Roman was in the doorway. He didn't speak. He didn't offer platitudes or touch her or ask if she was okay. He simply folded himself into the chair near the window and sat, present and quiet, while the sound of the city filtered in from below. She didn't tell him to leave. They sat like that for a long time. Sophia Grant arrived at 5 o'clock that afternoon, and she entered the penthouse as if she owned a share of it. She was stunning in the way of women who have worked very hard to weaponize their appearance. Dark hair, red mouth, a silk blouse the color of a bruise. She kissed Roman's cheek before he could step back and then turned to find Maya standing near the kitchen island, and the look she gave her was the look of a woman doing rapid, accurate calculations. "You must be the girl," Sophia said pleasantly. "I must be," Maya agreed. Sophia spent 40 minutes claiming Roman's attention, discussing things Maya wasn't privy to, laughing at things that weren't funny, touching his arm 3 times in ways that could be read as casual and weren't. Maya refilled her own water glass and observed all of this with the clinical focus of a woman who had just learned that trusting her own instincts about people was not one of her strengths, and was not in the mood to make the same mistake twice. Before Sophia left, she found Maya alone near the window. "A word of advice," she murmured, the pleasant mask still perfectly in place. "Leave while you still want to. Roman's world, it's not what it looks like from the outside. Once you're in it," she tilted her head, "you don't leave the same." She smiled. It was beautiful and entirely empty. Was that a warning or a threat? Maya asked. Sophia just kept smiling. "Darling," she said, "with Roman, those are always the same thing." That night, Maya lay awake and turned Sophia's words over in her mind. She thought about Roman in the doorway sitting with her in the silence. She thought about the way he'd looked at her across the dinner table the night before, like she was a problem he hadn't expected but wasn't sorry to have. She thought about whether she believed his protection was as simple as protection. She didn't have an answer. But she was beginning to think that was the most dangerous thing about him. Not his power, not his world, not the serpent tattoo on his hand. The most dangerous thing about Roman Cole was that he made her want to stay long enough to find out. Derek used Maya as a pawn. But Roman? He's playing a different game entirely, and Maya might be the prize. Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe to Nico I's stories. They left for the estate before sunrise. Roman gave her 10 minutes notice, a knock on her door, his voice through the wood. "We're moving. Pack what you need." And by the time she'd gathered the few things she'd been given and made it to the elevator, 2 black SUVs were waiting in the underground garage. She didn't ask why they were moving. She was getting better at reading the rhythm of his world, its silences, its sudden pivots, the way everyone around Roman moved when he moved like a current changing direction. The drive took 40 minutes south through New Jersey, and as the city fell away behind them and the highway opened up into longer, darker stretches of road, Maya found herself pressing her face to the window and watching the landscape change. By the time the car turned off onto a private road flanked by iron gates and old trees, the sky was beginning to pale at the edges. The Cole estate was not what she had expected. She had expected fortress, glass and steel and surveillance, something that looked like it had been designed to keep people out. What she found instead was a house that looked like it had been there for 100 years and intended to be there 100 more. Stone and ivy. Wide porches. A garden that even in November held the suggestion of something once careful and alive. Grounds that stretched in every direction into morning mist. It was, against every rational instinct, beautiful. "This is yours?" she asked, standing in the gravel drive. Roman, already moving toward the front door, glanced back. "My father's. Then mine." She followed him inside. The library was on the 2nd floor, a corner room with shelves that ran floor to ceiling and a fireplace that looked like it had not gone cold in years. Roman took her there that first afternoon, not as a gesture of intimacy but as a practical matter. You'll want something to do, and she had almost told him she didn't need him to curate her captivity, but then she stepped inside and forgot what she'd been about to say. She ran her finger along the spines. History, law, philosophy, fiction buried between military strategy and economics. A whole shelf of architecture. You actually read these, she said. Did you think they were decorative? Men like you usually go for decorative. There was a pause. When she turned around, he was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with something in his expression she hadn't seen before, something lighter, almost wry. Men like me, he repeated. You know what I mean. I don't think I do, he said. Tell me. She opened her mouth and then closed it. Because the truth was she was no longer sure she did know what she meant. The man she'd constructed in her mind, cold, transactional, dangerous, kept doing things that didn't fit the blueprint. Sitting with her in silence when she broke. Moving her here before the threat materialized instead of after. And now, a room full of red books and a fire that hadn't gone cold. Who taught you to love books? She asked instead. The lightness faded just slightly. My mother, he said. She was the reader in the family. Pause. She died when I was 16. Maya turned back to the shelves. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But he said it the way people say things that are not a long time ago at all. Over dinner, the first meal they shared at the estate, at a table small enough that the distance between them felt like a choice rather than a geography, Maya asked the question she'd been carrying since the safe house. Why did you enter the syndicate? You could have walked away from your father's world. Plenty of people do. Roman was quiet for a moment. He looked at his glass, then at her. Derek was 17 when my father decided to bring him in, he said. Our father's methods were not gentle. I had already been in for 2 years. I understood what it would do to a 17-year-old with no spine and too much appetite. He paused. I told my father I would handle Derek's initiation. Keep him at the edges. Keep him safe from the worst of it. And instead Derek learned enough to be useful, developed a taste for the money, and spent the next 15 years making choices that put him deeper in debt to people who don't forgive debt. Something moved through his expression, not quite bitterness, not quite grief, something compound and old. He has cost me more in cleanup than my actual enemies. And you still tried to warn him. At the party. He's still my brother. Said quietly, without warmth but with finality. As if brotherhood was not a feeling but a fact, like the weight of a stone. Maya looked at him across the small table and thought. Derek handed me to the one man he feared most, and that man doesn't even seem angry. Just tired. That's either very loyal or very foolish, she said. In my experience, Roman said, those are often the same thing. The voicemail came through on a burner phone one of Roman's men had collected from a source she didn't ask about. Roman handed her the phone and pressed play, and Derek's voice filled the kitchen in the easy, practiced cadence she had once found comforting. Maya, baby. I need you to know this wasn't, it got out of hand. You were never supposed to be hurt. I just need a little more time to sort things out and then you can come home and we can talk about. Roman pressed stop. He set the phone face down on the counter and picked up his own and made a call. 2 sentences, low and precise, then he hung up. What did you just do? Maya asked. I removed Derek's protection, Roman said. He's been operating under a degree of forbearance from my organization. That's over now. Maya looked at the face-down burner phone. 2 years of her life, contained in a voicemail that couldn't even say sorry without immediately pivoting to what he needed. Good, she said. Roman looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, something that wasn't quite surprise but was adjacent to it, as if she had confirmed a hypothesis he hadn't been sure about. She found his study at 11 o'clock that night, drawn by the light under the door. She knocked. He said come in and she did. He was at his desk but not working, papers to one side, one lamp on, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like a man who had come to the end of his performance for the day. No performance left. Just a man at a desk in a house that was too quiet. I want to understand something, she said. Ask. Why do you care what happens to me? Truthfully. She crossed her arms. You didn't know me before that rooftop. I'm your brother's girlfriend. I'm a liability. I'm, by Victor's logic, someone who's already stayed too long. She held his gaze. So what is this? Roman was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I don't let things I value disappear. The room was very still. You don't know me well enough to value me, she said, but her voice came out quieter than she intended. No, he agreed. He stood up from behind the desk and walked toward her slowly, the way he did everything, with total deliberateness, as if the possibility of hesitation had been removed from his operating system entirely. He stopped close enough that she could smell the cedar and whiskey of him. But I know what I saw on that rooftop. And I know what I've seen in the last 3 days. And I know, he paused, and the pause was the most human thing she'd seen from him yet, that I have no interest in not knowing more. Maya did not move. He did not move. The space between them was charged like the moment before lightning, that humming fullness in the air where something is about to happen and the world has not yet decided if it will. She thought about stepping back. She didn't. He thought about closing the distance. He didn't. They stood there in the almost for a long and breathless moment that left her hands unsteady long after she'd said goodnight and walked back down the hall. They were 3 blocks from the coal syndicate's Manhattan office when the first SUV came out of the side street. It happened fast, the way all real violence happens, nothing like the slow dramatic build-up of the movies, just a sudden hard sound of metal on metal and the world rotating 45 degrees. Maya's head hit the door frame and she grabbed the handle in front of her and held on while Victor, in the passenger seat, was already moving, pulling her low by reflex as the rear window cracked under the impact of something she couldn't process yet. Down, Roman said. Not a shout. Eerily level. The next 2 minutes were the most chaotic and clarifying of her life. She stayed low across the back seat, hands over her head, while the sounds above her told a story in a language she was learning under duress. Shouted directions, running feet, 2 sharp cracks that her body understood before her mind did. Roman was outside the car. She knew because she could hear him, not his voice but the quality of the activity around him, the way things organized themselves differently when he was present. Then Victor's door was wrenched open and she heard him take a hit. She moved without thinking. She pulled off her jacket and pressed it hard against Victor's side where the gash was bleeding, not a gunshot wound she realized, but something that had caught him when the windshield came in, a laceration deep enough to need pressure. Victor looked down at her with an expression that was equal parts pain and bewilderment. You're going to be fine, she told him in the voice she used to reassure panicking clients at events where everything had gone wrong, the voice that said I have this, trust me, breathe. Keep pressure on this. Don't move your arm. Just breathe. Victor looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. The ambush lasted 11 minutes by the car's clock. When it was over, and it was over with the decisiveness of a door being closed, Roman appeared at her window. She could read something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not fear but a version of the thing that lives behind fear in men who don't allow themselves to feel it. He checked her first. His eyes moved over her face, her hands, her arms. I'm fine, she said. Victor needs a doctor. Roman looked through the window at Victor, took stock of the situation in under a second, and had a phone to his ear before she'd finished speaking. She learned in the hours after what she was now dealing with. The Vega cartel had made its move, not because the debt was still outstanding, but because word had traveled that Roman Cole had gotten involved, and men like Hector Vega treated involvement from the coal syndicate the way other people treated a lit match. Something to respond to immediately before it could do more damage. It was, Roman explained to her, a mistake. By midnight she understood what he meant. She was not there for the calls he made, or the meetings she could hear through the closed door of the study. But she was there in the morning when Victor, arm bandaged, face tired, sat across from her at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and said without preamble, it's done. Vega took a deal. The original debt is cleared. You're not a target anymore. Maya wrapped both hands around her own cup. What does that mean for me? She asked. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then, it means you're free to go. He said it himself 2 hours later. Roman found her in the library, where she'd gone because it was the place in the estate that felt most like hers, even though nothing here was hers and she'd been here less than a week. He stood in the doorway as he always did, and he told her the situation was resolved, that her apartment had been swept and secured, that his people would drive her back to the city whenever she was ready. No pressure, he said. The words sounded foreign in his voice, like he'd looked them up and was using them with some uncertainty about the translation. No conditions. Your choice. Maya looked at him in the doorway. She thought, this is the part where I say thank you and leave. She said, okay. Lena was waiting outside the estate in the car of a man Maya didn't recognize, one of Roman's drivers, she realized, sent to collect her best friend so that Maya would have a familiar face for the drive back. That detail undid her a little. Lena threw her arms around her in the gravel drive and held on for a long time, and Maya held back just as hard, and there was a moment in that hug where everything she'd been carrying for the past week threatened to come loose at once. Lena smelled like their apartment and dry shampoo and a specific brand of lavender lotion that Maya had been buying in bulk from a drugstore on Amsterdam Avenue for 4 years. "I have so many questions," Lena said into her shoulder. "I know," Maya said. "I'll answer all of them." She pulled back. She looked at the car. She picked up her bag. She walked toward the car door. She got her hand around the handle. She stopped. She didn't plan it. She didn't decide it. It arrived in her body before it arrived in her mind. A stillness, a kind of gravitational refusal, the feeling of walking away from something you have not finished and your body knowing it before your brain does. She turned around. Lena, behind her, said nothing. She was watching Maya with the expression of a woman who has known her for 12 years and is not entirely surprised. Maya walked back to the front door. She pushed it open. Roman was standing in the entryway. He had not moved. He was still in the position she'd left him, hands in his pockets, jacket off, watching the door. As if he had expected her to come back, and had decided that the respectful thing to do was wait. The expression on his face when she walked back through that door was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen on him. Not triumph. Not surprise. Just something open, something he hadn't cleared from his face quickly enough. "I don't do safe," Maya said. Her voice was steady. "I've been trying to do safe for 2 years and I ended up drugged on a rooftop being handed to a cartel." She looked at him. "Safe is overrated." Roman said nothing. He was waiting for the rest. "I don't know what this is," she said. "I don't know what you are, or what your world is going to ask of me, or whether Sophia Grant is going to show up at inconvenient moments for the rest of my natural life." Pause. "But I know that you sat with me in the dark when you didn't have to. And I know you remembered the night I can't." She lifted her chin. "And I think I'd like to find out what that means." Roman looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the entryway and stopped in front of her, and he lifted his right hand, the one with the serpent crown tattoo, the one she had held in the dark without knowing why, and he offered it to her. She took it. His fingers closed around hers. And outside, through the door she'd walked back through, she heard Lena start her engine and pull slowly away, and she knew without looking that her best friend was smiling. Maya walked back in. Roman never let go. Some choices change everything, and this is just the beginning. Love this story? Share it and subscribe to Nicoai's Stories for more dark romance, mafia drama, and stories that keep you up at night.